What I saw was a deputy arrive at the west side of Building 12, take up a position, and he never went in.
The deputy has since resigned and retired. Joining me right now to weigh in on that and a lot more is the House Majority Whip and Louisiana Congressman Steve Scalise. Congressman Scalise, it's good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Maria.
And of course, Congressman, we want to begin with you. You were shot last year. The whole world was worried about you. Your security detail and Capitol Hill police immediately went to help you, returned fire to protect you and everybody else. So when you hear this story this morning that we know that there was an armed deputy outside the school, he knew there was a shooter, an active shooter, and he didn't go in. What's your reaction?
Maria, it's disgraceful. I mean, you just want to, you want to go strangle this guy. I mean, come on. You had a guy there with a gun who literally could have stopped the shooter, and he hid out instead. Look, I was blessed, like you said. I had two police officers who were there on duty, and both immediately went to the danger, engaged the shooter, and because they did that, it saved all of us, because he was trying to kill 15 members of Congress, and he was stopped because there were police officers there. This police officer should have stopped this shooter.
Yeah.
How many different breakdowns in government have we seen where here you had an armed deputy hiding out instead of stopping the shooter? The FBI had this kid's name months ago, saying he wanted to be a professional school shooter, and let him slip through the cracks. It just makes you irate.
It's very upsetting, and I know that those two officers that went in to try to help and returned fire, they were actually injured. You know, they both got injured. Yeah. But they did what they knew what was right to do. Yeah, they're heroes. Exactly right. What do you?
But they stopped the shooter because they went to the danger. And again, like you said, both of them were shot during my incident, and yet they were able to take down the shooter because they stayed engaged. And ultimately now they're back, and and God bless them.
What do you think about when we hear this conversation of gun control taking front and center again in the midst of this tragedy? What should people be thinking about as we calm down and try to understand what's happening in our country today and try to come up with the best solutions to not have these shootings at schools anymore?
Yeah, I still say the first thing that any of these victims need is prayer. They need prayer. I needed prayer. It surely helped me. And then you go find out what really went wrong. And unfortunately, in this case, we've seen so many breakdowns in a system that's already in place. How many laws were broken? And then people say, well, let's put more laws on the books. You wonder why law-abiding citizens are concerned about having their gun rights taken away when they see so many failures of government who should have done something to stop this. So, no rush to judgment. There's no magic bill that's going to stop the next thing from happening when so many laws are already on the books that weren't being enforced, that were broken, the breakdowns that happened. This is what drives people nuts.
You're right. And the whole conversation on the left immediately goes to gun control. And in fact, there were real mistakes made in terms of the FBI, by the way, not responding to the things that were put right in front of them. All right, let me switch gears. Right. You had a big success at the end of the year with tax reform. President Trump is expected to tout that today during his CPAC speech. It comes after Vice President Mike Pence took the stage at CPAC yesterday to rally conservatives around the president's economic agenda. But he also slammed House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. Watch this, sir. I want to get your reaction.
The best is yet to come, because as we speak, our economy has already started to feel the effects of that historic tax cut. Any leader who says that $1,000 in the pockets of working families is crumbs is out of touch with the American people.
Well, Congressman, it really is extraordinary. I mean, Nancy Pelosi now, with a history of taking strong stances, not only against GOP policies on economics, but health care, obviously tax reform, immigration. Here's what she's been saying over the last 6 months. Listen.
The debate on health care is life-death. This is Armageddon.
In terms of the bonus that corporate America received versus the crumbs that they are giving to workers to kind of put the schmooze on is so pathetic. It's so pathetic.
You're doing a grave disservice to our country. Some patriots.
Let's talk about where a more serious structure might be necessary, where fencing will do, or mowing the grass so that people can't be smuggled through the grass, and that's something.
Well, that was the top of the cake. Mow the grass instead of building a wall. Congressman, what do you make of all of this rhetoric?
I mean, I want her to continue speaking. I think the more that she talks, the more it shows just how out of touch radical liberals in Washington are with hardworking families. And Mike Pence, the vice president, is spot on as always when he talked about that. And President Trump has been incredibly good at making these points about not only how they're out of touch by saying it's crumbs when hardworking families needed that $1,000 right before Christmas, maybe to buy a new Christmas present for their kids, but how this is helping rebuild our economy, creating more jobs, and ultimately rebuilding the middle class that we've seen evaporate because we were uncompetitive as a nation, and now we are competitive again. In fact, we're going to be the world leader again, and we're going to bring those jobs back to America.
Tell me what the strategy is come November for the midterms, Congressman, because people need to understand if you lose the majority in the House, Nancy Pelosi becomes the next speaker.
Oh, make no mistake about it. Nancy Pelosi is working as hard as ever, raising record amounts of money. I'm sure she's raised over $30 million just in the last few months to try to become speaker again. So if you're looking at a swing district and it's a Republican versus a Democrat, sure, you can look at the differences in policy between the two, and maybe they're similar, but the Democrat's going to vote to reelect Nancy, or to put Nancy Pelosi back in as Speaker of the House. And let's remember how that went when she was Speaker. And the Republicans are going to vote to keep Paul Ryan. So there is a huge difference in some of these swing districts. And they're not giving up. They're fighting. We have a strong message. We have a strong economy going because of what we did to cut taxes. We've been controlling regulations so that these crazy regulators for 8 years had been literally running jobs out of the country. And we're focused on fixing even more problems, including in the workforce, getting people back to work, having an infrastructure plan that works where you don't have to wait 10 years to get a basic permit. You can maybe get it in 2 years or less, and it'll cost a lot less money to do these big projects.
So going into the November elections, you've got a secure strategy. Then you got the tax reform under your belt, the rolling back of regulations under your belt. That continues, leading into perhaps infrastructure, and then there's the build the wall. So let's talk about that. President Trump threatened to pull ICE agents out of California because California is constantly complaining about his wall and his immigration policies. What do you make of the president's hard line against the sanctuary state?
I think that the president is taking the right approach by saying, number one, he's going to secure the American border. Building the wall is part of that. That's what's in our bill, the Goodlatte-McCall bill in the House. It secures the border, builds the wall, uses technology to secure different parts of the border as well, giving our ICE agents the tools they need. Let's crack down on these sanctuary cities and states where they literally have government leaders saying, ignore the laws on the books. We are a rule nation that's a rule of law. Every nation defends their borders and has laws. Let's make sure we're enforcing our laws and make sure we're strengthening our border, addressing the DACA problem, ending chain migration and the visa lottery program. We do all of that in our bill, and we're working with President Trump to get that done.
Yeah, and in addition to all of that, you have to also look at what's happened on the other side, and that is a real abuse of power. When you look at the top of the FBI, the abuses of to the FISA court, is that something that you're going to be sort of running on going into the midterms as well?
I think holding government accountable when it fails is something critical that we need to do while we're doing all these other things. We're working to rebuild our military. We're working to make sure these federal agencies are working. But in many cases, when we find breakdowns, for too long, they just look the other way. It's time to stop looking the other way and holding people accountable. The FBI is right there. I mean, again, we saw with the shooter, they had his name spelled correctly months before the shooting. Didn't do anything, but they're running around on these Russia witch hunts and all these other things that they seem to have a lot of time to do, and yet they don't have time to protect our kids in schools and do some of the basic things when somebody gives them a tip that's a very credible tip and they let it slip through the cracks.
Yeah, it's very upsetting, actually. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thank you so much.
Always great to be with you, Maria.
We'll see you soon.